How important is your faith? Your faith, on a scale from 1 to 10, how important is it? Is it a 1 or a 2? Is it a 9, 10? Or maybe some of us, it may even be a 12. It may be the most precious thing that we have, our belief in God and what will happen due to that belief. See, when we look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6, we see the Hebrews writers explaining faith as this. But without faith it is impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. See, when we see this faith that the Hebrews writer talks about, without this kind of faith, it is impossible to please God. It's impossible to do the things that God would have us to be doing. And many of us spend our lives and our downtime thinking about things, wondering how we can use the gifts and talents that God has blessed us with to serve him acceptably. How do we do this? Well, if we don't do these things in faith or in accordance to faith, we're not being pleasing to God. Now notice the components that the Hebrews writer gives. He who comes to God must believe that he is. And the idea is that's a mental component. I believe that God exists. I believe that God is real. He's alive in heaven. He reigns or in control. And so we believe that he's there. And then we have the three-letter word and. And is a conjunction that makes both sides or both phrases equal. See, if the word said or, you could have one or the other. You can make a choice. You can choose one or give preference to one over the other. But with the word and, it's not that way. You have to have both. And so when we look at this, what we find is without faith it's impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. We got to believe that he'll reward, or trust that he'll reward those who come after him or seek after his will. See, that's the component. The component is we believe, there's a mental part, and then we do. There's a seeking part. We look for how God's will will be played out in our lives. Or how can we use our lives to bring honor and glory to our most holy God? When we look here in Hebrews 11, the writer gives us lots of examples. Examples of men and women who lived by faith. Because they lived by faith, they were blessed. Notice when we start looking in verse 4. By faith, Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained a witness that he was righteous. Now notice, what was the difference between Cain and Abel's sacrifices according to the Hebrews writer? Abel offered his sacrifices by faith. Cain did not offer his sacrifices by faith. Certainly, Cain believed God exists. In fact, when we turn our Bibles back to Genesis 4, where this is quoted from, we find that he talks to God. So he mentally understands that God exists. But he did not do the things that God would have him to do. But Abel, on the other hand, offered those sacrifices which were deemed acceptable by God. Why was that? Because he did it by faith. Verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was found not because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. Now notice, God took Enoch away. So he didn't have to see death. He didn't have to taste death like you and I one day will. Why? Because the portion of his life he was here, he pleased God. He did those things by faith. He acted upon the things that he knew that God had given. Notice verse 7. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness, which is accordance to faith. Now notice that Noah was warned by God that there was going to be a flood that was going to happen. He was supposed to build an ark. He was supposed to put his household on the ark. He was also supposed to put certain animals on the ark in different numbers. Noah did not just dream this up, and Noah did not conjure up how to make the ark on his own. Noah did it in accordance to faith, what God told him. Notice in verse 8, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. Now notice, Abraham's travels did not occur because he had this great epiphany or this great thought that I will just travel out. No, God told him to leave his country, his father's house, and to go to a place that God would show him. He did not know where he was going, but he went in accordance to his faith. God told him to go, and so he went. When we look here in verse 11, by faith Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now notice, Sarah acted in accordance to faith. She was barren, she was past childbearing age, and yet she judged God faithful. And so she lived by her faith, and she received a son. See, when we start thinking about faith in our lives, the place it should hold, we have to go back and think about what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 1 and verse 17, which he quotes from Habakkuk 2:4. The just shall live by faith. Now again, this faith isn't a wish or a will. It's not a, I'm going to jump out and throw caution to the wind. No. The faith that the Bible speaks of is one that's built upon the Word of God. In fact, Paul goes on to say in Romans 10:17, so then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. See, the faith that we live by is in accordance to this Word. We read it, we strive to understand it, and we apply it. When we start thinking about our faith and how precious it is to us, it should be a very precious thing indeed, because we believe in the most holy God of the universe, and we are His servants. And we get to serve Him and bring honor and glory to His name. So I must ask you a question again. How important is your faith to you? And what are you going to do with it?